So thank you for coming to my talk. I know that there's a little bit of competition now. Those of you who don't know me, I usually speak without my shoes. It's kind of a gimmick. I think you should try that now, especially here. The carpet is really nice, so you can try that. I'm going to talk about the automotive challenge, and we hear stuff about hacking cars, but no one actually explains to us why things are the way they are. So this is not going to be another talk about how we cracked something or how we broke something, but more a talk about understanding why the world looks the way it does. So we all know that cars are important. We use them for, driving the things that are most important to us, our family, things that we own. So, it's a very important part of our lives. And we know that if a car gets hacked, then something really bad can happen. We've already understood that from the stuff that has been published. And even without hacking a car, we know that if a car breaks down, then serious things could happen, right? But we don't really know why hacking cars is something that keeps happening and why is it repeating and what can we do about that really? So let's talk about that. The problem with cars is that they are very complex products. We're used to thinking about, let's look at this clicker, right? I went to the store, I got a clicker, it's manufactured by, I don't know, whomever, Logitech. I paid Logitech, I got a clicker, and that's it, right? I don't know what's inside. But a car is a lot more complicated than the average product that you will end up buying in your, during your life, right? Let's look at the number of parts. A car is a big outsourcing project. When you pay, let's say, Audi, okay? No particular reason, I just picked this photo. When you buy an Audi, Audi doesn't make the entire car. Sometimes the manufacturer, the label that you're paying for, they only make about 30% of the car. The rest of it is manufactured by other companies that are called Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3. And this here is just a partial list of the manufacturers that participate in the Audi that you can see here, right? And this is a partial list, and in this list you already have 32 manufacturers. So when Audi makes a car, they buy a lot of parts from a lot of different manufacturers, and Audi has to do all the integration, and all the parts need to work with each other. Someone makes the key, the remote keyless entry. Someone makes the wheel. Someone makes the engine control. Someone makes the brakes. Someone makes the signals. Everybody makes part of the car, and then you have to put it all together. And it's not just Audi. Turns out that pretty much every car looks like that. And especially with modern cars that have more and more technology, and more companies are, jumping on the bandwagon and adding technology to cars. So a car that you buy has hardware from many, many different manufacturers. And of course, with a lot of hardware comes a lot of code. In fact, it is estimated that the modern car has more lines of code that was actually needed to fly the space shuttle. So that just gives you the perspective of how much code there is actually in your car. People sometimes like to say the car computer, but there's no one car computer. There are many different devices in your car, and they're all hardware running software, okay? And it is estimated that the number of known bugs in a released car, you buy a new car from the dealer, it is estimated that there are about, more or less, 10,000 known bugs in the product that you buy that made it to the release. Why? Because maybe they were not important, or there was not enough time to fix them. Maybe they will fix them in the next version. Any reason. But 10,000 bugs in the software, right? And someone is going to be looking for those. Now, this is just the ones that we know of. From conversations that we had in the industry, it turns out that the estimated number of unknown bugs, bugs that exist in the product and the manufacturers are not aware of them, is 5 times as high. So you're driving with a brand new car with 50,000 bugs in it, right? And that's going to stay in your possession for a few years. And the reason that we know all that is they actually make surveys, and they ask the people from the car industry what they think about security and what they think about their quality of code and security. And this is a survey from 2015, so it's a little old, right? And they asked, secure software is a priority for my company. And only 41% said yes. Only 41% from the people who work at the car industry who were interviewed for this said that it is a priority. And when asked, I believe that securing the applications needed is difficult or very difficult, then almost 70% said yes. So yeah, they understand that security is difficult, but people are not confident that it's getting enough attention. And when asked, I believe that automakers are as knowledgeable about secure software development as other industries, over 70% said no. So the people that write the software for the cars admit that they believe that the automotive industry is not as informed about security as other industries, and that tells you something. Now, this is a generic schematic of a car from 12 years ago. Every one of the boxes that you see is called an ECU, electronic control unit, and it is a little part of the car that is in charge of something. In the engine, in the interior, in the driving, and whatever, doesn't matter. So you can already see that about 12 years ago, there are close to 60 different ECUs here. So these are 60 different, almost computers. Some are more computers than others, but almost 60. And this is 12 years ago. But if you look at a modern car, this is a car from this year, there are close to 200. Think of the scale, almost 200 computers in your car, right? So just remember this for a moment. Now, it's true, not all of these ECUs are as sophisticated or as important. On one end of the scale, we have this is the TPMS, Tire Pressure Measurement System. So these little buddies are inside the wheel, and they measure the air pressure, and if there's a problem, they send it wirelessly to this device. So while this only takes measurement of your tire pressure, it is still an IoT device with a radio transmitter and firmware. Okay? If this were somewhere else, you would say, there's a problem here. A computer communicating wirelessly, by the way, this is not encrypted anywhere. You can think about the possibilities of what you could do with that. But this is the low end of the scale. On the high end of the scale, we have what we call the infotainment, or sometimes the head unit. Okay, these are the computers that give you the navigation and the stereo, but also, you control the interior of the car, like the air conditioning. Maybe you play with some of the functionalities of the car if you want to turn on anti-skid or turn it off or control other features. So this is a device that controls both things that are not related to driving, but also things that are related to driving, right? And this, in fact, is a full-fledged computer, sometimes running 2 to 3 different CPUs with multiple cores in them, running modern operating systems. Could be Android, could be Linux, could be any variation. So this is pretty much as sophisticated as, one of your mobile devices, right? Your mobile phone, maybe a tablet, maybe you have a Chromebook or something. This is the same thing. And this also has connectivity, and we'll get to that later. Now, all these computers that in the car, they need to talk to each other somehow. And it turns out that the car is sophisticated not only in the sheer number of parts that it has, but also in the ways they communicate. The networks in the car. There is not just one network. There are, in fact, between 5 and 7 different types of networks in one single car. And each network has its own characteristics. Some of them, for example, are chosen for their low latency. If you crashed your car into something, then you want the information from the crash sensors to get as quickly as possible to the ABS and to the airbag. This is the most important thing, airbag. Airbag needs to know that you crashed your car as quickly as possible. So there's one network that is super fast, but another network, like FlexRay or, for example, the MOST, this is for multimedia. Let's say that you have, when you drive in reverse, you have the little camera, right? So it's not that important if it takes 100 milliseconds more or 100 milliseconds less. You're a human being. You don't see anything that is faster than 24 frames a second anyway. So that network needs to support large volumes of traffic, but not so fast or in a latency that is not very important. And there are different networks. Some of them were developed over time, so they're not all at the same age. So we have over 100 different computers, over 5 or 6 different networks. So this is starting to look a little bit like a little, company, what we call SMB, small and medium business. Maybe this hotel, right? The systems that they have in the hotel. Maybe a lawyer's office. I don't know, right? So this is the CAN bus. The CAN bus, or the CAN architecture, that's the bus that I said that has to be the quickest. It's also the oldest. And I want to show you an interesting thing. The first field, which is called the arbitration field, is basically also your ID. When you want to talk, it's a broadcasting. You speak to everyone and everyone listens. So you start by saying, hello, I am number 10100. Now, it turns out that your ID is also the priority. The lower the number, the higher the priority. And the bus is designed in such a way that if someone with priority 5 is speaking, and then someone with a lower priority or higher priority, let's say priority 1, wants to speak, then the one that's 5 is going to stop, right? But here's the thing. There is no authentication. Nothing prevents you, if you are connected to the CAN bus, to send out a message pretending to be ID 1 or even 0, the highest priority. Which means that you could send out a message that would trump any other message, make everybody else stop talking, or you could just pretend to be somebody you're not. For example, if you pretend to be the crash sensor and you send the right message, then the airbag will open because there's a crash. Because there's no way to make sure that you are who you say you are. Now, a car is also something that takes a long time to make. There's a lot of regulation involved. You can't just build something. There are rules to follow, development cycles. There's something called the automotive V, which shows exactly what are the stages in the planning of the car, the design, the building, the testing, and there's a lot of regulation, and this means that to make a car from the beginning to end, let's say we want to make a new car and until it's on the road, it can take 5 years. So imagine that some decision was made in the beginning of the process, like which operating system to use, and it was approved and it went through regulation. But now 4 more years pass, and when you roll out the car, you already have something that is 4 years old. Because if you wanted to change the software, then maybe the regulation that you passed before doesn't, qualify anymore. Maybe you have to do it again. So when the process takes 5 years, it has implications as well. Now, a mobile phone, though, you will buy, you will have it for what? Roughly 2 years, more or less. We drop them, we lose them. Apple updates the software, it becomes too slow, we get a new one, right? So we, more or less, 2 years, right? 1.5, 2 years, right? A PC, this, by the way, is my favorite one, that will last 5 to 6 years, right? More or less, you buy a laptop or a desktop, and I'll smile, yes. And it'll last 5 or 6 years before it's really slow and you have to get a new one. But a car, you buy a car or a car is rolled out, it will stay on the road for up to 15 years. And maybe you're not the only owner, you buy it and then you sell it, but it's the same car and there's no update. So you're going to have a car on the road with software that is 15 years old. Imagine that. We have vulnerabilities, like look at Microsoft Windows. Every month there are new vulnerabilities. And this is software that is 15 years old. So that's a problem. Now, unlike Microsoft Windows that can do the remote update, you can't do that with cars. If you find a big problem in a car, you have to do a recall. You have to go to the shop and leave your car and then get a bus. And that can take a few hours or maybe a day. So you lose time and money. You don't have your car. The car shop, instead of, fixing cars and charging money for that and making profit, they have to fix problems that are not profitable for them. And the manufacturer has to pay for all of that. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. Now, as attackers, we look at the entry vector. When I want to attack something, what are the ways by which I can approach it, communicate with it, and attack it? And with cars, pretty much like with everything else, any way by which the car is connected to the outside world, anything at all, is considered an attack vector. Some of them more trivial than others. But, for example, GPS. You would say, what, GPS? But it only receives. You can't, speak using the GPS. Well, guess what? Just this year, there has been an attack, a research published, that shows how you can spoof GPS to the extent that it will fool navigation systems on your phone or your car. This is already existing. It was done. It was published, right? Remote keyless entries, countless research. Countless research. Most interesting one from about a month and a half ago, a group of researchers in Belgium found that the manufacturer of the module used by Tesla and other luxury car manufacturers was only using a 40-bit encryption between the key and the ECU in the car. So they did some research and built, the rainbow tables. And now it takes them 1.6 seconds to break the key and make a copy of your car key and drive away. 1.6 seconds, right? OBD, onboard diagnostics, that's the port that you have in the car for diagnostics. You can attack through there. TPMS, I mentioned. Of course, supply chain. If somewhere down the road someone hacks one of the manufacturers of the tier 1 or something, then you buy a piece, you put it in the car, it's already infected. That can also happen. But the most frightening thing is the infotainment, because like we said before, that's the whole computer. And just like any other computer, it is connected to the outside world with many different interfaces. From the USB drive that you're supposed to be using for playing your MP3 files, but sometimes it's also used for firmware updates, to SD cards that load maps. It has radio. So RDS, there was also a research showing code execution over the RDS. That's the data channel in the radio station that shows you the name of the song or the name of the station. There is code execution over that. So basically, everything here is vulnerable. Everything, right? So that doesn't look very good. Now, problem is that like all other industries, if you will look around, you will see that many industries are now running to make their products connected. Amazon just published a line of products connected to the internet. Why do you need to connect your microwave oven to the internet? I don't know. But for the consumer, connected means convenient. And this is always the balance. Security is always, at the other end of the scale versus usability, right? Usability and security, right? It's one against the other. So companies want to sell more, so they connect their stuff to the internet. And then you can control your air conditioner from the mobile device. How? There is a device in your home that is connected to the network, and it has an infrared blaster, right? And you have an app on your phone, so you look at your phone, you say, turn on air conditioning. And it sends a message through the cloud to this little device, and that device blasts the infrared. But that device is an IoT device, a computer, running software on your internal network, right? So that's a problem. So the car industry is doing the same. Making cars connected, rushing to make the cars connected, and just like other industries, right? We can't say only bad things about the car industry, right? Just like everybody else, they're rushing to connect without first making sure what the possible problems are. And now they're starting to understand but when it started, they didn't. And if you break down your microwave oven, you order pizza. But what happens if you mess your car? What happens if it's when you're on the highway? That could be a problem, a serious problem. Remember my second slide. So there are problems that we already know of that exist in everything else that is connected to the internet, but there are also problems that we're not aware of yet because cars represent a whole new world to attack. And these also are still not being treated. And it's important to remember that. Now, I'm telling you stories, scary stories, what we call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But the fact is that everything that I told you has already happened. People all around the world are performing research, and all of these things have already happened. So let's just look at a few of them, right? If you look at the media, you will see that pretty much all the big manufacturers have already been hacked one way or another. No one is immune. Just remember that. No one is immune. The academia has been looking at this for a long while. As early as 2004, you had research going on about securing networks inside the car. And this year, 2018, you already have the very advanced stuff of, okay, we have electric cars, they have a battery. What happens if the battery is exhausted? What happens if you do it maliciously? So that is also already covered. These two guys, Chris and Charlie, they were the tipping point of the attention to car security. In two researches, one published in 2014 and the other one in 2015, they showed that they could remotely, from anywhere in the world, through the internet, take over a car and make it do things. There was a very famous video with a Wired reporter. They had him drive on the highway. They started, changing the air conditioning and the music, and they killed the car while he was on the highway. That was a little bit dangerous. Maybe they shouldn't have done that. But while he was driving on the highway, they killed the engine from, 2 states away over the internet. And all of a sudden, the world woke up to a problem. You can control cars from remotely over the internet. And that was something that no one thought about before. And they even published another research a few months ago about autonomous cars. Also some problems there. These two guys, which are speaking after me, are somewhere here probably, they talk about something else. We always talk about hacking, stealing, destroying. But there's another issue, especially this year since GDPR, the issue of privacy. They showed, and I'm just going to say one line because that's their talk, that if you have a car that is not properly protected, then a lot of your private information will be found on that car and not necessarily taken care of the way it should be. So I don't want to spoil. They'll be talking after me. And then came Tesla. So Tesla, brand new car, electric, very, very sexy. And of course, researchers, we like to break stuff, and the more fancy, the better. So it was pretty obvious once it came out that it was going to get a lot of attention. And indeed, it got it. DEF CON 23, there was already the first talk about hacking the Tesla. And these guys, they had the best conditions. They basically tore the car apart, which is almost what Chris and Charlie did on the first research in 2014. And they showed a lot of vulnerabilities, what happens if you have physical access to the car. You can connect from here, you can connect from there. They found some problems. That was very nice. That was very, very nice research. But only 2 years or 1 year later, this group, the Chinese guys from Keen Security, presented last year at Black Hat complete remote takeover of a Tesla. Remote takeover of a Tesla. Imagine you buy a car, a brand new car, and someone just controls it from anywhere, okay? And again, thinking outside the box, yes, you can hack cars, but as car manufacturers are becoming more and more aware of it, they're putting in mitigations that didn't exist before. This is a company from Norway that said, let's not bother hacking the car. There's an app on your phone that controls the car. It's a lot easier to hack phones. We already know how to do that. So they performed a research showing how taking over somebody's phone by installing malicious software on the phone enabled them to steal a car. So they didn't do anything to the car, only to the phone, and yet they drove away with a Tesla. And two researches that were published this year, the first one in April by this Dutch company, and then the next one with the same Chinese guys in May, they showed a lot of problems with the infotainment system. But the thing was that these problems had already been found in the past and published in other researches. And still, these two different groups found the same problems in two different systems. One of them was in systems by Harman that were installed in Volkswagen and Audi, and the other research was about BMW. And it wasn't all about remote code execution and buffer overflow and exploit, all the nice things that security researchers like to say to scare you because you don't understand it, so you think it's got to be important if I don't understand it. No. Some of the problems were very basic. Open ports on the wireless network of the car that the driver can connect to. Why? Because no one thought about it. It's a matter of awareness. Security is a matter of awareness. And it's the same problems again and again and again. And this is from this year. This is not the last research. There has been more since. Now, there are rumors We don't know for sure, but there are rumors. I've been hearing stuff that there has been at least one attack in the wild that was caught, mitigated, and silenced. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. These are rumors. If you have any information, I would love to hear it from you. Of course, I will not quote you, but we're already starting to see something going on, right? Now, this is a table or a pie chart that talks about the penetration testing services that Argus, the company I work for, was hired to perform. And the interesting thing about this is that there was 100% success. There hasn't been a single project, not a single one, that the pen test was not successful. Old car, new cars, older technology, new technology, sophisticated, simple, every single one of these projects, we were able to either reach code execution on the ECU we were looking at or inject messages to the CAN bus. Every single one, okay? Now, the fact that we performed these pen tests already shows a lot of improvement. The manufacturers understand. And they're like, okay, so this is already designed, already built. Please check it, let us know what's going on. So you see, the state of mind is changing, but the problems are still there. Now, you don't need to be a super pen tester to do that. This is a device that costs about $8 on eBay, and it lets you connect that to this OBD port that you have under your wheel, and it will let you talk to the car, and you can do all sorts of diagnostic things. Look for error codes, maybe change the error codes. Sometimes you can configure things on your car. This requires no training at all. You buy the device, you get an app, and that's it. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could cause damage. So the risk to a car is not always from a hacker. Sometimes it's also from the owner. If they do something they're not aware of, and now they drive the car on the highway, and what they did is causing a problem, that could be serious, okay? Now, we already have some standards that try to solve some of the problems. This, for example, the SecOC, is intended to solve the problem that I mentioned before about no authentication over the CAN bus. But the problem is that it's not always implemented. And sometimes it's implemented, but not on all the ECUs in the car. So we still have problems, even though we're starting to see mitigations making their way into cars. Now, okay, we now know why we have problems in car, because they're so sophisticated in many ways. And we know that all these problems are real-world problems that have already been exploited. So this is a serious thing. So what happens now? Let's start by drawing conclusions. You don't need to be a super hacker to hack cars. We keep seeing the same problems again and again in published research, right? Old unpatched software is repeatedly used. Linux systems from 3 generations back are in the infotainment systems of a brand new car. Why? Because it takes 5 years, and it got approved 3 years ago, and now it's old. Back then it wasn't, but it is now. And there are many logical vulnerabilities. It's not all about buffer overflows, like, no domain separation, open ports on the wireless network, right? So not everything requires a top-notch research or exploit. In fact, you can be a script kiddie and still hack a car, especially today when people rush to publish what they find. You can download scripts and tools all over the internet to hack cars. Just today or this week, another research was published, and there's a research showing how with SDR, software-defined radio, you can hack the keys, the remote keyless entry of a car. Key fob, it's called, and it's all the time. And I did the same, and I even ruined my one of my keys because I was doing a replay attack, and then the attack worked, but then my key was no longer working because of a sync problem. And I used a device that I bought on the internet to do that. You don't need a lot of stuff. Now, let's look at the threat. The threat is cybercrime. Why? Because when cybercrime goes into something, then the scale immediately becomes big. So let's look at the cost. If you want to hack a car, what is the cost of operation? And we will compare cars to the IT world, which we already know. We're all familiar with it. This is why we're here. So finding a vulnerability. In the IT security world, it can be trivial and up. Why? Because there's so much software from so many manufacturers. There's always going to be a vulnerability. And sometimes it's super easy to find it, and sometimes it's super difficult. You have the entire range. And guess what? With automotive, it's the same. Sometimes the vulnerabilities are super easy, like open ports. Sometimes it is code execution over bad parsing of messages over the CAN bus. So as far as this goes, the two domains are more or less the same. Exploiting, however, is something else. Finding a problem is one thing, right? Finding a vulnerability, making your computer crash, that's relatively easy. You can do it automatically. You can do fuzzing, or, I had a friend who used to write exploits for browsers. And instead of fuzzing and trying to crash browsers and find the vulnerabilities, he did something a lot easier. He signed up to all the web developer portals. And he waited for people to say, "Hi, I built this website, but it crashes my browser. Can you please help me?" Right? If your browser crashed, there was a vulnerability there. But exploiting is different. Now, in the IT security world, it turns out that exploitation is becoming harder and harder all the time. Why? Because we've been having this problem for so long, the industry has been introducing mitigations. First, there was nothing. Then there was DEP. And then you had ASLR. And then this and that. And all of these mitigations. And ARM just published a new mitigation about pointer authentication in the new version. So the industry is responding. And if it is said, I heard it in one of the conferences that I spoke at, that if, let's say, a few years or 5 or 10 years ago, exploiting would take you a few hours to maybe a couple of days, today, creating a working exploit can take you a few weeks. And if you look at all the pwn-to-own competitions or browser exploits, you will see that today it's no longer enough to exploit one vulnerability. It has to be a chain of vulnerabilities. One of them gives you code execution, and then you have to do sandbox escape, and then you have to do privilege escalation to become root or administrator, and only then you can do whatever you want. So it's becoming harder and harder. But on the vehicle world, it's not like that, because there are not as many mitigations. So once you find the vulnerability, it is relatively easy or medium hard to create the exploit. Now, of course, why do you hack? Because you want to make money out of it. So what is the return on investment? Monetization, the ability to generate revenue off of what you're doing. In the IT security world, it's a solved problem. Cybercrime is so sophisticated. We have crime as a service. People generate complete systems to generate money. If you go on the blog by Brian Krebs, it's called Krebs on Security, then on the bottom right corner, there's a little nice diagram showing the uses for a hacked computer. The different things that can be done with your computer by a criminal. And almost all of them at the end translate to money. Either I steal your money from the bank, or I steal your credit card and then I use it or sell it to somebody else. Or I use your bandwidth to send spam, or your email to send spam, or I sell it to somebody else who sends spam. Or maybe I'm a pedophile, so I'm storing my photos on your computer. Now that's your problem. If they come to my house, there's nothing there. So everything that you have can be translated into money or something worth money to somebody else. And the same is not true for automotive. In fact, except for these two problems, which as far as we can tell are pretty much platform agnostic, ransomware and crypto mining, there's really no good way yet to monetize on a car. Let's say you hacked my car. Other than these two, what can you do to make money out of it? Not a lot. It's not very easy. It's not impossible, but it's not very easy. And of course, it's not enough to make money. You want to make money at scale. But because if you invest money in hacking and then all you get is a little premium, it's not worth your trouble. So once again, IT security world, easy. You can buy for a few $100 or $1,000 the services that will create a botnet that is 300,000 computers big, and then you send email and spam and infect people and install malware, whatever. Scale is a solved problem. With cars, not so much. Now, yes, it is proven. Chris and Charlie, when they did the research, they estimated that they could have access to about between 300,000 and 400,000 cars. So when they reported it and Chrysler performed the recall, they recalled 1.2 million cars. Okay, the manufacturer looked at the problem and reached the conclusion that it was impacting 1.2 million cars. This is scale. And some people in my talk sometime raised a hand and said, wasn't there a crime gang in the UK stealing cars in 4 million pounds? Yes. But maybe for us in this room, 4 million pounds is scale. It's not scale. Okay? It was a one-time thing. They got lucky. It's not really scale. And also, there's a lot of risk there. People actually went to houses. You can't do this remotely. So, this is in fact our luck. We are at a almost unprecedented point in history where defense is actually ahead of offense. Monetizing car hacking at scale is still not possible. So cybercrime is not yet involved. They're sitting on the fence, and they're waiting for the reality to change. And it is up to us to push this as far as we can, to keep this gap for as long as we can. Because of all the different standards and all the different manufacturers, once again, it's not easy to attack at scale, but this is changing. We're starting to see vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure, so everybody is going to have to speak the same language. We're looking at ECU consolidation. Instead of taking 5 different ECUs, we're going to take one strong computer and have it do all 5 roles. But now it's one computer. If I take over it, I now have control of 5 ECUs and not just one. And when you have autonomous vehicles, then all of a sudden, hijacking cars can be translated into money. Okay? So, reminding you, this is how sophisticated a car network is, and it is pretty much like the office network of a small and medium business. So we have to treat it like that. And the solutions already exist. Because all of these problems have already existed in the IT security world, we have the solutions. Now, you can't just take them and implement them. You can't just take a checkpoint firewall and put it in your car. It doesn't work like that. Scenario is different, technology is a little different, but you can adapt it. And like everything else, like in all the other industries, it's a multi-layer thing. You have to be able to prevent as much of the attacks as you can. You have to be able to detect the attacks, and you have to be able to mitigate it remotely. And this is very important because you're going to be talking about car fleets, not just one car. One car doesn't interest anyone. That's not scale. If you want to fight scale, you have to be able to remediate at scale. Now, security by design is something we hear about a lot, right? Do security by design, you're going to have a lot less problems. But the problem with this is that when companies try to implement that, they don't have security people doing the security by design. So it's not as good as it should be. This needs to be done by a security person. Don't just take a developer and tell them, okay, now you're in charge of security. That's not going to work. And if you don't have that person, it's okay to bring someone from outside. Security as a service is okay. It's legitimate. Get a company to do that for you. Now, legislation is starting to change that. We're hoping that legislation makes a change in 2 areas. One, not so much important, which is deterrence, like punishments. But, criminals, by definition, then they don't follow the rule. But the other side of legislation is actually going to make your cars more secure because it's going to force the manufacturers to put in more security. And this is something that we hope will help us all. So, summing up, cars are like a network of a little company. It's sophisticated. A lot of computers, a lot of different protocols. It's a big thing. And the tools to solve the problem, they're already there. We need to make adaptations, but it's there. Okay? These are relatively solved problems. And there's no silver bullets. It's layered. If anyone tells you, I have the solution to solve all your problems, just, disregard them. It's very unprofessional to say that. So we, the security people, are like the people with the finger in the dike. We are the ones keeping the gap between office and defense. And if we stop doing that, then the floodgates are going to open. And when cybercrime realizes that hacking cars at scale can be monetized, then we're going to have a problem.